Okay, so the Nintendo Switch versus the Nintendo Wii U in 2021. Which is the better system? Now, in terms of the graphics capabilities, the Switch is superior. It is said to be 4 to 5 times more powerful than a Wii U. And anybody that has played these two versions of this game knows exactly what I mean by that, because the Wii U version suffers from frame rate issues all across the map when you're just walking around, whereas the Switch version only suffers from that in like 2 or 3 areas, or if there's like a whole bunch of enemies on the screen or something, right? Not to mention the Wii U only renders it at 720p, whereas the Switch renders it at 900p when docked and 720p when in handheld mode. Right, and we see similar performance boosts on the Switch with various other games such as Bayonetta 2 and a lot more. And also on Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, the Switch version has higher resolution textures and even higher resolution normal maps compared to the Wii U version. In terms of build quality, I've had to replace both the joysticks on my Switch right there. Whereas my Wii U came used, it definitely had a previous owner, and I haven't had a single issue with the joysticks on its controller. Right, so there's something to consider. In terms of the build quality of the controller, the Wii U feels more solid compared to the Switch. In terms of games, well, we'll get into that, but the Wii U is better for a retro gaming machine, whereas the Switch is a better gaming machine for the modern AAA games. It doesn't have everything, but it has a lot more third-party support than the Wii U ever did. Okay, so the Wii U has a handful of AAA 7th gen multi-platform titles from the PlayStation 3 and the Xbox 360. They have some performance issues, but generally speaking, they look just as good, if not better in some cases, than those two consoles because it had a better graphics card. Right? It didn't have as good of a CPU, but it had a better graphics card. It had more RAM, though the RAM bandwidth was lower. The Nintendo Switch, on the other hand, has many of those same AAA 7th gen games, but it also has quite a few AAA 8th gen multi-platform titles from the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as well. And that's something that cannot be said of the Wii U. Now, most of the Wii U exclusives have moved over to the Switch, Bayonetta 2, Breath of the Wild, Mario 3D World, those types of games. But there still remain like 12 or 13 games for the Wii U that have not made it to the Switch. Games such as Twilight Princess HD, Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Star Fox Zero, and a few others. Now, there are quite a few exclusives on the Switch that are not on the Wii U or any other console. Some from, Nintendo themselves and some from third-party developers. Games like Astral Chain, the Pokemon games, Mario, of course, and there's actually quite a few others. Now, of course, neither of them have a Grand Theft Auto game on them, but they both have a decent substitute for it. Watch Dogs on the Wii U, though it has some performance issues, it's still playable.
Out here right away. It's not looking good.
This is squad. We got a green light on CCOS search. Scanning for suspect now.
And Saints Row 3, which also has some performance issues, and Saints Row 4, which doesn't actually have too many performance issues at all. Those are on the Switch, along with Red Faction Guerrilla. Now, the Wii U has a few open-world superhero games, like The Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2, as well as a few Batman games. The Switch, on the other hand, doesn't have a single superhero game that interests me. It has Marvel's Ultimate Alliance or something, and I just can't get into a game like that. Now, the Wii U has a few old Call of Duty games, along with a handful of other first-person shooters, like there's a James Bond game on there. But the Switch, on the other hand, has Doom Eternal and Doom 2016, Wolfenstein 2, Wolfenstein Youngblood, and quite a few others, Bulletstorm, several other first-person shooter games have made it to the Switch from this generation, along with some classics like Doom, Duke Nukem, and retro games like Iron Fury. Now, both consoles have a single Need for Speed game on them. Need for Speed Most Wanted on the Wii U. And Hot Pursuit Remastered on the Switch. And personally, I prefer Hot Pursuit, because it doesn't rely on the open world trope and instead just delivers a racing game. You click the mission or whatever, and there, boom, you're racing on a track with other cars. The Switch has a proper racing sim, however, and that is Grid Autosport, along with several others, but Grid Autosport is the most notable one because it makes use of the GameCube adapter and its analog triggers for throttle and brakes, which is something that is lacking even in other racing sims on the Switch, and certainly lacking on the Wii U. Now, both consoles have their open-world sci-fi/fantasy titles. Xenoblade Chronicles X is the most notable one on the Wii U.
Ready?
They're all guard. Stagger them with a melee attack.
Staggering!
Fire carnival!
Flame grenade!
While the Switch has quite a few of them these days, from Skyrim to The Witcher 3 to Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to a whole lot more. There's actually quite a few open world titles like that on the Switch these days. Not all of them run good, like The Outer Worlds for an example, but many of them run adequate enough to be playable, on a handheld, mind you. Now, as for flying games, both consoles are quite limited. The Wii U has Star Fox Zero, and the best flying game on Switch is still Sky Gambler's Afterburner, which is a franchise lifted out of the mobile market. But it's still good and worth playing, to be totally honest with you. It's almost as good as Ace Combat.
Got motions on the radar. Flares reloaded.
So the Nintendo Switch is the superior console for 8th gen games from AAA developers, whereas the Wii U, however, is backwards compatible with the Wii. And its Virtual Console has support for NES, Super Nintendo, Game Boy Advance, DS, and Nintendo 64 titles. This means that almost every version of Metroid, Zelda, and Mario up to the Wii U's timeline can be played on the Wii U, with the exception of the 3DS, the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, and the GameCube games that weren't ported to the Wii. Speaking of Metroid, playing Metroid Prime Hunters on the Wii U has to be the most accurate first-person shooter game that's ever been released to a console due to the Wii U's touchscreen and stylus, even more accurate than the Wii's motion controls, almost as accurate as a keyboard and mouse. Now, the Switch, on the other hand, only has NES and Super Nintendo games on its Virtual Console, and there's only been like a handful of other games from other systems released for it. You know, there's a couple of Turok games from the N64. There's, Super Mario 3D All Stars, and just a handful of games like that. Now, onto the part of these consoles that Nintendo doesn't want me to talk about: the modding. I won't get into piracy talk, but modding the Wii U is fairly easy these days, as is modding an unpatched Switch. Modding a patched Switch, however, will require a mod chip and some soldering skills, or some money to give it to somebody that has those skills. And which system has the better mods on it? This ultimately depends on what it is that you're looking for. The Wii U, when running with a modded Virtual Wii, can play every single GameCube game at full speed and no graphics glitches, upscaled to 1080p, as well as the Triforce arcade games, all three of them that were actually worth playing.
Lock S4's in attack position. Watch yourself. There's a lot of fire coming from the right side of that deflection tower.
I copy, Red Leader.
We've got to destroy those deflection towers.
Red Leader, we've got you covered. I'm going after the towers. Cover me. Big switch, follow me. Let's close up.
Right with you, Luke.
Great shot, Luke.
You can also inject some games into the Virtual Console emulators that Nintendo has provided, though compatibility isn't all that great, to be honest with you. For example, GoldenEye on the N64 isn't really playable, and Chinatown Wars on the DS isn't either. That said, there are still a decent amount of games that will run on these emulators with little to no issue. What this means is that the Wii U is backwards compatible with 3 generations of games released on Nintendo consoles from 2001 to 2017, and can emulate consoles prior to that and handhelds up to the DS. However, the homebrew sort of third-party emulators leave a bit to be desired, as there's not that many there, and they really only go up to the 16-bit era and Game Boy Advance, and then more or less stop after that. There have been a few projects to get PSP emulation working, and it runs some games, but it's really not that great. Now, the Switch has some amazing mods in its own right as well. It can emulate even the tougher Nintendo 64 games like Rogue Squadron, albeit with some overclocking.
Run through Baker's Canyon. Luke, I think we've got a problem. Is that my imagination, or are those Imperial probe droids dead ahead? They're attacking, no?
And even emulate several Dreamcast games without needing to be overclocked. It also has tons of apps that allow you to listen to music and watch movies if you so choose to do so. There's homebrew apps that allow you to stream video game footage to your PC without a capture card at 720p and 30 frames per second, and really several more, including homebrew ports of GZ Doom and Sonic Roboblast 2. That's just for the Switch's operating system with some custom firmware. Sit back, now are you ready? The Nintendo Switch is also capable of running Ubuntu and full, completely functional Android 10 operating systems from a microSD card. This means that you can play several Android games, the ones that don't suck, with ease.
I gotta call my pimp.
With Android on your Switch, you can stream music from internet radio apps, do everything online that you want to, including pay bills, read your email, etc. And even emulate a decent selection of GameCube titles. Though when it comes to playing GameCube games, the Wii U will always outperform the Switch, since it has a similar CPU and the addition of the Wii's GPU. The limitation is that you can't use online video in HD with the Switch running Android, whether it be from YouTube or Netflix. For that, you'll need to use Ubuntu, which can be overclocked beyond what the Android operating system can do, allowing you to get some better performance out of emulation overall. So which system is better in 2021? That ultimately depends on what you're after. If you want an all-in-one machine that can play retro Nintendo titles, the Wii backwards compatibility and Virtual Console makes the Wii U a better choice. If you want to play more modern games from AAA developers, as well as the new Nintendo titles, obviously the Switch will be a better choice. If you're into modding, the Wii U is great for playing GameCube games, but the Switch has more emulators and emulators that are more capable when it comes to, say, N64 emulation. Not to mention fully functional Android and Ubuntu dual booting, allowing you to turn your Switch into a PC or tablet, and all the functionality that comes with that. Oh, and plus the Nintendo Switch is fully portable, whereas the Wii U's controller can only be moved around in my apartment. Beyond that, it pretty much cuts out. And honestly, I would recommend getting both, but the price tag on the Wii U is a bit steep these days, so it's ultimately down to what you're looking for, unless you choose to get both.